Hi, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Igor, thank you so much for having me. A pleasure to be here.
Well, let's start off with, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Well, I always like to start off first most that I am a dedicated family man, happily married to my wife Maria now for over 10 years, second marriage, and a proud father of my son CJ, who is in his first year at Coastal Carolina University. And what I do as a living, I am a emotional intelligence and communication strategist. So I'm an expert in those areas in helping business owners, business leaders, and sales professionals and how they can elevate their communication in a way that can now convert and close more business. So it's not about persuasion, it's about influence and knowing how to communicate effectively across different generational types, cultural types, and even generational types. And then with that, how you can create better experiences and increase revenue and profit in any type of business. A lot of times, business owners don't see that as a foundation to the success and where they are and where they desire to be.
Yeah, that's communication is not something you hear from a lot of the business influencers out there. They talk about all these different things, but communication is rarely mentioned. So, in your experience, what really separates someone who communicates effectively from someone who struggles to get buy-in from their team?
Well, a lot of times these are issues that are common across many different organizations. I don't care if it's a mom and pop or a Fortune 500 company. Most communication is based on assumption and speculation, meaning that we just assume the person or people that we are communicating with understand what's important and what we're trying to do. 9 out of 10 times, that is not the case, and vice versa. And oftentimes, we're waiting for the other person to communicate in a very specific, clear, and concise way. The reality is, we can't control other people and situations. We can only control ourselves. But when we can learn now to understand that how people process information from a communication way, it's not always the same. Different personalities process information differently. When you look at business owners, many of them typically are what we call D's on the DISC profile, meaning that they like to identify with what questions. What can we do better to make this challenge improve to get these results? Spare me the details. Now, if I'm talking to an engineer, a project manager, or someone that's a little bit more analytical in their thinking, technical, maybe they have a technical background like a CFO, CTO, that type of level, they're going to process things in an analytical way, that there has to be a sequence of things that have to be proven for them to believe or adopt something to make that challenge better to get the results they seek. So they need more detail. Those are what we call task-oriented type personalities. Now you got other personalities, oftentimes sales, could be HR people, people that are more charismatic in their approach to people. They value people first over the results. So they care about who it impacts. So even though they like the results that a task-oriented business owner would like, they want to know who it's going to impact first. So if we don't get to the who, then they don't really going to care about the what at that point. You're not going to build rapport and trust. And then there are some people that don't like to be in the limelight. They don't like to make decisions. They don't like to take calculated risks. And they are what we call great team players. They're often in procurement. They're usually supporting the heads of a team. And they're great people to have on your team, except they're not going to make a decision very quickly. So if you're looking to persuade them, good luck. And they like to identify with why questions because they're very systematic in their approach. So you have to build that rapport and trust delicately over time. Now, if we can understand these personality types better, how we communicate that through our voice when we're communicating one-to-one, one to few, or one-to-many, when we are typing emails, when we are corresponding through our website and identifying with overall what is the common personality that would be the gist of our audience. See, we take this for granted. We just assume that how we communicate to one is the same to another. Now, if you layer in different generational types, cultural and ethnic types, well, guess what? You're missing the needle. And we don't realize that we can be now reducing the number of touch points on the buyer's journey for people to say yes when we can understand this better and how it incorporates in our day-to-day communication between our team members to build higher engagement, thus will lend itself to creating a better customer experience, and how we approach and communicate to our prospects and audience in our industry through the different channels, through face-to-face, in writing, through our marketing, through our PR, all of the above. There is a strategy to it. And when you can learn how to do it effectively, it could be a game changer long term in terms of converting and closing more business.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that you really have to target the way that you deliver your message to these different personality types. And so in a situation where if you're running a team and you know fairly well everyone that's on your team, that's easier to do. You mentioned in a sales situation when
Yeah,
you're meeting with a potential client for maybe the first time. I mean, how do you gauge what type of personality they are so you can
absolutely.
adjust your message?
Well, you have to know your audience, Igor, first. And now, I mean, that doesn't mean you're going to know everybody. That would be impossible. But nonetheless, you really got to know your audience. Most businesses assume they know their audience. I've done an assessment time and time again, and when those assessments came back, they didn't know their audience like they thought they did. So it requires a little homework. You got to go out and extract some of this information on a macro level. Perplexity Pro is a great tool, AI tool, to extract this factual information on a macro level, kind of giving you kind of like a benchmark to kind of work with. And then you got to go out and get get it at a micro level, like literally going out and surveying. You don't have to actually do a survey, but actually talk to maybe 25 to 50 of these types of people that you would normally do business with. Get an idea what is the bulk of the people you're talking to, what could be their personality type. See, for me, I target business owners and high performers. Does that mean they're all going to be the same personality? No. But a bulk of them are going to be mostly Ds. Task-oriented, want the results. What do I have to do to get it? Spare me the details. See, that's where my message has to align to. Now, there are other people that have different personalities that process things differently that I work with or could be part of my audience. That being said, I can't be everything for everyone. I can't have a message just tailored overall to everyone. It's got to be to the bulk of what that audience is. Knowing when I'm having those one-to-ones and maybe certain siloed conversations, by picking up on that, I can adapt my conversation and my content to them. So it's more compelling to them. It's registering with them more subconsciously for me to build more rapport and trust faster to possibly convert and close them in business.
Okay, so sounds like the first step that when you engage with a client is really to understand their audience, and from there to develop a plan to help your client reach their audience better. Is
Yeah,
there
you have to understand their challenge. If you go in there and just gonna give, sell features and benefits and tell them how you're gonna help them, it's not gonna register right away, even if there's remote interest. You have to know your audience, again, do the best you can to the ability down to personality, generational, culture, and ethic type. And now it's all about open-ended questions, disguising the impact that you want to get across to them in the question. There is power when somebody's got to answer a question, especially when it aligns with their personality. I like to ask more what questions with task-oriented decision makers like Ds. If they're more technical people, analytical, I use a lot of how questions. If they're more, again, an influencer, kind of more, they're more extroverted in their approach, I like to ask a lot of who questions, who it impacts. And then if they're more like not a decision maker, but they're a great team player, they can be a champion for me, I tend to ask a lot of why questions. Now you can layer in other types of questions, but with that being said, you have to be able to, the most important thing is you got to get to the root cause of the challenge that can be better for them through the questioning, and what are the results they seek and don't have. Don't assume they know that. Many of them don't. They don't have clarity. They have an idea, but they don't have a clarity. It's only through the questioning process with what I just talked about down to personality, generational, and cultural and ethic types that we can uncover that and get them to answer for themselves so that when they have more clarity, they feel like that you relate and understand them. And that's like what a trusted advisor does. That builds that rapport, it builds that level of trust and eventually respect. Now when they are ready, now when the challenge is great enough to do something about it to make it better, and the results are great enough now to take action to achieve them, who are they going to think of first? You, over somebody else that just went through the features and benefits and tried to persuade and convince them why working with us would be the best thing since sliced bread for their business.
That sounds, yeah, that sounds right. So what, when a client comes to you, what type of issues are do you help them resolve? I mean, obviously at the end of the day, it's revenue, but what are the bottlenecks and challenges that you've seen clients have that you've helped them solve to get what
Absolutely.
they.
Well, here's a great point. You just said revenue. So let's say there's a revenue problem. So the first thing that people will assume is, well, maybe our messaging is off, which it probably is. That's very important. Sure. You got to know your audience, and or maybe maybe their price is too high. Again, they just assume. But what they don't realize is there could be many other factors that go even deeper why their revenue is struggling. It could be be the issues that are happening on the inside. Their team is not gelling. They're not unified. They're not communicating at a high level. And because of that, they have retention problems. They have communication issues. There could be a level of conflict that could be considered somewhat toxic. And because of all of this lack of cohesion on the inside, do you think it's going to reflect outward to their customers and their alliance partners? Absolutely. And as a result of that, that could be the very thing that could be now pushing people away. People may not realize it consciously, but they pick up on it subconsciously because everything in the world is energy. We all vibrate on different frequencies. And when we have disconnect and we have conflict and we have people pointing the finger at one another and deflecting how they feel onto each other, those are the things that are creating a lower vibrational energy that could be pushing people away, starting with your own people and then eventually customers and prospects. That could be a factor, and that has to be addressed. Number one, that's why companies like Zappos, online shoe retailer, are ranked in the top 5 for customer service year after year. Why? Because they sell great shoes? No. It's because they understand that the core of their success is built from within. Every day they cultivate and build in a psychologically safe workplace. They communicate at a high level. They work on each other. They work on an individual level, a team level, and an organization level to build that cohesion. That then reflects outward into the people they're serving to create a better experience. Thus, why they sustain customers and why they're able to upsell and generate more revenue. It's not rocket science, but a lot of times businesses take that for granted. They think it's a bunch of BS, and they just keep doing the same things over and over, sending people to sales training that is going to be useless because you got people with different levels of confidence and self-esteem. They don't have an EQ foundation. And if without an EQ foundation, emotional intelligence, all that stuff that you're learning in the sales training doesn't really going to matter. Because if you're going to break the 80-20 rule, you got to be able to help somebody build their level of confidence. They have to learn how to communicate better to themselves and other people. They have to learn how to shift away from being a passive communicator to an assertive communicator, or an aggressive communicator to assertive communicator. People don't realize why that is so important when we're trying to build rapport and trust with people, because people don't know this consciously. They know it subconsciously. That's where the magic is. And it just takes awareness over and over before people finally, it sinks in that it makes sense. And again, numbers don't lie. And I always say that if I can put your KPIs next to what we're doing here, and then in 1 year from now measure to see where you were and where you are now, will your numbers tell you the truth? Absolutely, because numbers don't lie.
Sounds like a lot of leaders of the organizations that you work with aren't even aware of the misalignment that's going on inside. And so how do you go in and how do you bring that to the surface? And then after you do that, do you have your own curriculum that, you have the team work through under your guidance to align them together? Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
Yeah, so I do an assessment, and usually again it starts with understanding each other's role and duties in the organization. Now, granted, if this is a bigger company, it takes a little bit more time because you have more people to do this with. But let's just take an example of a company of 20 people. Just use that as an example. That's relatively a little bit easier. I can go in there and assess each of those people's role and duties. Now, you would assume that everybody knows their role and duties and they know each other's role and duties. Now, they know that on some level, on some level, yes. But do they truly, really, truly know their role and duties and each other like they think they do? No, because every time I do the assessment, it clearly shows the opposite. That's where the disconnect comes in. This is where expectations fall through the cracks. This is where when someone was supposed to do this because the other person expected it, it didn't happen. And then that's what causes more friction, disengagement, and eventually conflict, so to speak. It's the same thing with customers. We assume what we think was important to our customers. I see this with businesses all the time. They go out, not all businesses, but some that will just go off thinking what they know and what they want, and they'll go out and build a product without even doing the research to gather this information to determine, is this something that somebody would buy based upon a challenge that they like that could be better as a result of it, and to get the results they seek and don't have as a result of that product or service. Many don't do that. They just assume. And these are the things that are so critical. But everything I do is customized, and it's based upon what I call the EQ advantage. It's got to start with how we think, and how we think determines how we be. How we be determines what we become. What we become determines how we do things differently and better. And how we do things differently and better will determine the results that we get that are different from where we are. It's through that foundation of the EQ advantage how we can elevate leadership by example, understanding each other's role and duties much better than we have done before, communicating at a higher level, knowing how to delegate and value our time, putting up healthy boundaries to now work in cohesion to complement each other's role and duties, not depend on each other in a codependent type of environment. And thus, when that happens from the inside, it can reflect outward in creating better experiences for our customers, clients, patients, whatever that business is. And then from that, how we can then find ways to increase revenue, profit, and other KPI on the back end of that. That's what helps a business not only increase revenue, but their net profit margin, and thus their business valuation so at the time of exit, they're able to get more for their money or more for their business.
Thanks for explaining
Sure.
your process. So you also work with businesses to help them refine their value proposition messaging. What's the key to
Yeah.
creating a message that resonates with their target audience?
Yeah, so that would be again, going out and doing a market study. Doesn't mean you have to do a full-blown market study like a big company like Apple, but take a look at some of those big companies like Apple, Coke. Did they just assume everybody wanted an iPhone or they wanted this different version of Coke? No, they went out and did market studies. And now you don't have to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. There are ways now with the AI technology, we can gather a lot of information on a macro level. But you can't just go off the macro. The macro gives you the foundation of knowing your audience. It's now doing the micro work and going out and talking to so many of your prospects or customers at that point to now gather this data to determine what is the bulk of that audience looking for. What is the common challenge that comes back from this feedback that can be better? What is the common result or results that they're saying that they would desire but don't have now? That's where that met value proposition has to be built on. So for me, because I target high performers and business owners, these again are people that want to know what they can do to get the results, less detail. When people go to my website, it doesn't say how I could help them. It says, what if your business metrics unfolded a narrative continuous growth in profit and revenue? Question mark. Yeah, our business metrics could be better. A narrative, because now that's the key word, narrative. What is a narrative? Is that a process? Is that some kind of new methodology? A narrative of compounding revenue and profit fostered through stronger team leadership dynamics and creating a valuable customer experience. So I just shared with them what do they have to do to make that happen. They have to build a psychologically safe workplace through self-leadership, understanding each other's role and duties, communicating at a higher level. And now when that reflects outward, that will help to create a customer experience. Awesome. That's what we have to do? Yep. Okay. Well, how do I do that? See, now if I build my rapport and trust with them, more likely if they are serious now about making that happen, who are they going to consider probably working with? Me, probably over someone else that really didn't help them to connect the dots. See, that's where that value proposition is important, because it interrupts their thinking. It plants a seed. Now, if they see that on my newsletter, they see it on my email marketing, maybe they read one of my posts, maybe they go to my company page on social media and they can see things that are kind of tied around that similar message. They heard me on a podcast. They saw me speak at an industry B2B conference. I had a one-to-one with them, one-to-few with them. Cohesion of that message in different ways. It's still the same message, but just spun differently, catering to maybe certain personality types, cultural archetypes, generational types. Subconsciously now starts to say, am I ready to take action? I, on average, can reduce the number of touch points through that process across all businesses, anywhere from 20 to 100 touch points to 5 or 12. That's on average. Depends on the business, of course. Some businesses have longer sales cycles, depending upon the complexity of the product and service and the industry they're in. But nonetheless, this process works when you can truly look at it as both a strategy and also a form of art as well. Because again, the way people process information, that's the difference between brands that understand that versus the ones that don't, that are making more money and generating more business.
Could you share a story, maybe a favorite client you've had that came to you and you worked with them, and what was their issue and what
Yep.
was their outcome?
So I'll give you an example. And this one was not considered, like, they're not like a sales organization. So I'll give you an example. I worked with a commercial construction company. And this was a commercial construction company that what they did is they built like rec centers, schools. They also built, I don't know what you call it, but they're like where you have residences, like they could be like considered townhomes or apartments. And then on the bottom, they were like, there was retail. So these would be in urban centers or downtown areas that are, and so there would be people that could live right on top of, businesses, either restaurants or little stores, that type of thing. So this is what this business did. Now, there was a gentleman that was a VP of sales that had saw me speak at a conference, a construction conference in Las Vegas. And he was so intrigued by what I've been sharing with you, like, wow, I just never would have thought that. He goes, there are a lot of people in our industry that would just, like, they would think that was a bunch of baloney, because, it's a very conservative industry. And a lot of times you get some older timers that might say that's a bunch of crap. And then they're still dealing with the same issues, the same backlash, the same crap over and over, and nothing changes. Nonetheless, he built up a case for me. He was a champion for me, and he got the ear of the CEO. Now, this was a 600-man company. And it started off with one workshop where I came in and I worked with 12 people. I worked with him, some of the other leaders, so it was strictly for the leaders at this point, and the CEO. They went through the program and they were like, wow, this was mind-blowing. We've never seen anything like this spun this way, and I got great personal value. Now, they actually bought into it. The CEO bought into it, and eventually he decided to roll it out to 2 more cohorts. Now these were next level in terms of management, so we did that. Now, here was some of the challenge they were having. They had a retention problem. There was a lot of miscommunication going on. They were losing bids on certain projects because when they did a bid, there was like 10 people that would be involved in the communication process when talking to the interested party to now sell the job. And they were, in some cases, now losing these bids even when they were slightly the lower bidder, because for whatever reason that entity didn't trust them. Whatever reason. Because again, there was a lot of miscommunication. There were people that had different levels of confidence and self-esteem. They weren't flowing. The energy was off. Now, retention issues, communication issues, leadership issues, all of these we went in and we did this training and we did this coaching over almost a 2.5 year period. We assigned KPIs on an individual, team, and organizational level. And as we did this, we began to track after they went through this program, and they continued to be accountable. So it wasn't like hey, that was great, and then, are they going to remember it all? No, we kept dripping things to them to keep reminding them, keeping them, so that they could understand and apply this on a daily basis. I've never seen a company commit at that level, ever. Not especially the amount of people we did. They saw a huge increase in their KPIs. Retention went up, engagement went up, communication was better, there was less things falling through the cracks. They were now even winning some bids even when they were slightly the higher bidder because they influenced the other party because they felt like we could trust you. We don't, just because somebody's going to come in with the low bid doesn't mean they're going to do the job on our time and it's going to cost us more money on the back end. They positioned themselves as trusted advisors and started from the inside out. That is all documented. All documented. Unfortunately, most companies don't commit the resources and time to do that. It's usually an awareness session, a workshop, or a small group of certain people, and that's the extent of it, which is unfortunate because they're chasing the money on a short term because the stakeholders want their profits. Great. But if you're always going to be reacting and jumping through hoops and going through a turnstile of people to do it, well, guess what? That ain't going to be the long-term answer. There's a better way. The better way is to commit to this type of process or something similar that's going to make it more sustainable. That's no coincidence. That's the name of my coaching consulting business, Sustainable Success.
The best leaders are the ones that continue to educate themselves and continue to grow, right? So why wouldn't you invest in something not just for yourself, but also for your management team? Because that will trickle down through all levels. So thanks
Exactly.
for sharing that. So what would you say, what are some of your biggest challenges that you've come across working with some of the leaders and having them the way that they do things?
Usually one of the biggest challenges is accountability. It's just that they're not willing to be accountable and a lot of times that's not just at the tactical level or the middle management level. That's at the top. So a lot of times the message that's being sent to that level is, well, we have to do this or we're looking to change and make things better, but why isn't our upper management doing the same thing? So it's like they're being told to do something, yet the actions, the behavior, the attitude, how they react versus respond, and the lack of action contradicts everything they're saying. That's usually the biggest challenge for me. Is the accountability is and the commitment is not there. But if you ask any successful organization, companies like Zappos or any company or even any individual, they will share with you it's that daily resilience and commitment to the process, focusing on what can I do better than I did yesterday, not about being the best. And it's those organizations that long-term win. And it's no coincidence in sports. Why do certain teams just continuously go to the postseason and win the big game? Because they got the best talent? No, there are teams that have far better talent. But it's not talent or credentials or experience in itself that are going to win the big game. It's the skill set being applied in ways that can be improved on each and every day. And it's how we think to be, to become, to do, and have. That's why Tom Brady went down as the best quarterback of all time. Was it because he was the most physically and gifted? Was he the most talented quarterback? No, far from it. What separated Tom amongst everybody else was the way he thought, his brain, continuously improving, the desire to win, the desire to turn any challenge into an opportunity and then into a result, that resilience. If he relied upon his talent, skill, or experience itself, he would have been an average quarterback or at the very least a serviceable player, if that. That's what separated him. And he had the ability to communicate that to other people. So the Patriots were a prime example of that back in the day when Julian Edelman, if you looked at that guy, Julian Edelman, the receiver, was he some physically gifted football player? No, he wasn't the fastest. He was a converted quarterback to a receiver. Didn't even play receiver in college. And yet, he's one of the best slot receivers to play the game. Because, again, he adopted a similar way of thinking that he was influenced by Tom Brady and thus had a stellar career, maybe possibly a Hall of Fame career. We'll see what happens. But nonetheless, that's the differences between sustainable success and versus success in moments. And when I say sustainable success, I don't mean that you're going to have success at every day. You're going to go through challenges. You're going to have setbacks. You might some days feel like everything is falling apart, but that's not how you think. You see everything happening for you. Nonetheless, you're going to have more wins than losses with that type of philosophy. I call it the EQ advantage.
Agreed. I think at the end of the day, the more frequent our wins, the better we feel, the better everything goes. So for someone listening right now, if they want to take a step towards developing the Tom Brady EQ advantage in leadership, what's something they could do starting right now or tomorrow morning when they wake up?
Well, here's just something to understand. You have to understand what you can control and what you can't control. And there's only one thing that you can control: you. You can control your communication to yourself and others. Now, in an assertive versus a passive aggressive way. 99% of the world communicates in a passive and or aggressive way. And that style of communication creates more codependency, more friction, less engagement, and more reaction to now managing the problem. And it's simple. It's in every workplace, every business, every household, every church, every community in the world. So you can control your communication to yourself and others, listening to your inner champion versus your inner critic, and being assertive. You can control your behavior. Is your behavior in alignment with your communication in an assertive way? I'm a recovering passive communicator and aggressive behaviorist. That's how I lived the first 31 years of my life. I was a product of my environment growing up as a kid. And then I took it into my adult life, and that's how it played out. That's what most people do. That's what most people are doing in any given day in a company when they work in their business unit, and then we're interacting with other business units. So I could control my communication, my behavior. I could control my attitude. It's happening for me, not to me. I embrace the challenge. I embrace the setback and problem. I see it as an opportunity to create a result. I don't deflect how I feel onto others. I don't gossip, complain, and point the finger. I can control my emotions. I either can respond or react. If I'm angry, that's okay, but I don't have to react from it. I can now take a breath. I can remove myself for 10 minutes. I can go home and sleep on it and then come back and now respond from a positive emotion, not a negative. I can deal with it on my own. So responding versus react, and my action. Most people are busy, but not productive. They're caught up in things that are not even relevant to what's important. They're involved in things that could be easily delegated, which now if they were delegated, they could free up their time to focus on the things that really matter. And the things that really matter are the things that are most uncomfortable. But a lot of people avoid and escape it because they're afraid of failure. They're afraid of what people might think. So we have to break these patterns. You can control those 5 things. You can't control those same 5 things in other people in situations. So as a business leader, if you can learn to focus on what you can control and what you can't control, that is a start establishing an EQ foundation. When you get caught up in outcomes, your mind's in the past and the future, you're going to live your life by expectations, and expectations for the most part are going to always fall short because you are now caught up in other people and situations beyond your control. How are you going to experience that? Stress, anxiety, frustration, anger. So ask yourself, if you're stressed and you're angry consistently, you're stressed consistently, you're overwhelmed, you're caught up in the control you can't control. If you are now more intentional, not from expectations, and trust the process of what you can control versus what you can't control eventually, hopefully, will come into your control like a puzzle. And as you add more pieces, it will then lead to the results you see. It's just a different way of getting to your results. I'm intentional towards my results. I don't expect my results. That puts me more in control of what I can control, and that's me. That's it. Now I got to be an example of that every day and be a resource for others to do the same in their role and duties. And as we do that as a team, guess what? We're going to win more, and we're going to create better experiences for our clients, and we're going to generate more revenue, and we're going to increase more of those KPIs if measured correctly. So that would be the one thing I recommend.
All right. Well, I'm very grateful for you taking the time to come on your show and leaving us with all of your wisdom that you've shared. Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me